Okay. If you've been joining us, we've been walking through a series that we're calling Secret Sexual Basement and Scripture. We're taking the clinical framework of Dr. Minwalla's model and overlaying it with Scripture. And so far, most of this series, we've been talking primarily about the downstairs, the basement. Today, we're actually going to go upstairs. If you think about that metaphor that Minwalla developed for his model, it's a home with a hidden basement underneath it. And down there's a whole alternative reality, a parallel reality that only one member of the home built and maintains and protects. And although we've been spending most of our time looking downstairs, looking at the basement itself, we've talked about the divided heart that ends up building a basement in the first place. We've talked about the secret life that it contains. I think last time we talked about the entitlement that a man has buried deep inside of him that convinces him that he deserves this. Today, I want us to look at the part of the house that everybody can see. We're going to look upstairs. The basement that we men had only stays secret if the house above looks great. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, nice landscaping, a warm, welcoming porch light, and a welcome mat. And all of that's doing a job. And the job for us, metaphorically, is to make sure no one ever asks what's underneath everything. That is what we're going to call image management today. And image management goes a lot deeper than just being dishonest. Image management, when it comes to the deceptive sexuality and trauma model, it's where we men manufactured a counterfeit self. It's the man who builds an image of himself for the public. And that image that we're going to look at today is designed to compete with and even to cover the image that God has already placed in us. We've looked before at Genesis, our origin story, and we're going to look at it again today in a new angle. But it says that we're made in the image of God. When a man has image management, he's basically saying to God, thanks, but I'm going to make my own image. So the question today is, which image are you living from? Are you living from the image that was given to you by your creator that is a reflection of him? Or are you living from one that you built? First, let's talk about what image management actually is and what it's not. Every human being has what I would call normal social presentation. You comb your hair before you have a job interview. You probably clean your house before guests come over. When you tell somebody about your weekend, you might embellish a little bit or add a little bit more excitement than how it really went down. That's ordinary social life. That's universal. That's normal social presentation. It's ubiquitous. Everybody does it. That's not what we're talking about today. That's not what we mean by image management in the context of the deceptive sexuality trauma model. What we are talking about today is a public image that is a manufactured, engineered version of self that has a function, it has a job. And that function is to keep a hidden, abusive, deceptive sexual reality operating. Take away the image upstairs and the basement is vulnerable because the image that we've curated is what keeps everyone from looking. In the Minwalla model, it describes a man with a basement. When he goes down there, he becomes a person that his family would never recognize. Down in the basement, He is someone whose values and thoughts and feelings and attitudes are in stark contrast to how he presents himself upstairs or publicly. The presentation upstairs isn't incidental to the deception, it is part of the deception. During what Minwalla calls the covert phase, which is before the basement is exposed, his model lists behaviors that keep the basement hidden. He says there's lying and there's lying by omission. There's deceptive tactics and there's manipulations. Blaming the partner. Intentional manipulation of her reality. And stories that we tell ourselves to justify everything that we're doing. Minwalla calls this covert phase a form of covert domination and control of another human being. It's this polished image that we present upstairs that is the delivery system for the whole operation. What I want to explore today is that the image that we present upstairs does three jobs for us, which is why I say this is not normal social presentation like every other human does. This is doing something very specific. The first job is this: it's managing our partner. She is living with a man whose public and private presentation is warm and kind, often trustworthy. And that presentation that we give upstairs is precisely what makes her gut feel crazy, because her instincts keep telling her that something is off, but the image that we present keeps denying it. So our image is managing our partner. The second function it has is that it manages the community, our world. We're not just controlling our partner, we're trying to control the world that we live in. Coworkers, friends, extended family, neighbors, perhaps your faith community, they're all interacting with the manufactured man, not the real man. So every detail, every handshake, every compliment that your curated self receives is just another brick in the wall around the basement. Our community, our circle of relationships, that affection that they have for the image that we're presenting becomes like a security system for the basement. It's insurance. It's a backup plan that no one will ever find out what's really going on down here. Not only is our manufactured image, our counterfeit self, doing a job managing our partner and doing a job managing our community, but one job that we don't think about very much is that it's also managing the man himself. When I lived inside a manufactured image long enough, I start to believe my own marketing. I start to believe my own lies. That image was built for the audience, but we become sitting on the front row of it. It's called self-deception. Self-deception and image management feed each other. After enough years, a man can no longer tell where his performance ends and where his authentic self begins. So I want you to watch what happens when D-Day comes. D-Day is the day of exposure. Minwalla documents the defenses that spike. At the moment of discovery, it's usually stonewalling, denying, controlling the narrative, gaslighting our partner, sometimes anger. Men, ask yourself right now, which of these defenses did you deploy on D-Day? What was it, all of them? And what were they protecting? They weren't just protecting the secrets down in the basement. They were protecting an image that you built. They certainly weren't protecting our partner. Many of us men, in the very hour that our wives discovered at least part of the truth, and they are bleeding out emotionally on D-Day and the days following, we respond by running kind of a crisis PR campaign for a version of self that never even really existed. Let me summarize what we've said so far with just a contrast. You either have an image that you were given by your creator, or you have an image that you're building and manufacturing. The false version of you, the origin is you. You crafted it. The purpose is concealment of the basement and covert control of those who are in proximity to you, especially your partner. And it takes a tremendous, exhausting amount of energy to maintain this manufactured image. And if there's some kind of potential exposure, we go into crisis public relations mode with several of those behaviors that Minwalla listed. Contrast that to where if we simply rely upon the image of God that he's already given us. The origin of that is we didn't create it. We didn't achieve it. We didn't architect it. It was received and it's permanent. And the purpose of this image that God gave us is to be a true representation of our authentic self and to reflect to others what God is like. The energy required to simply bear this image that God's already given us is what I would call serenity, peace, rest. And when there is some kind of threat of an exposure of who we are, our authentic self, when we are operating in the image of God that he gave us, we respond with vulnerability, curiosity, and radical truth with our partners. Let's look a little bit deeper at the image that we were given. And let's start where the Bible starts. The Bible starts in the very first human. And God says about that human, Adam and Eve, he said, let us make man, that word man means humanity, in our image, after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. What that means is before you did anything, before you achieved anything, or before you failed at anything, you were an image. It was given to you. You didn't manufacture it. That image is God's image. Theologians in Latin call it the Imago Dei. And I want you to notice the grammar of it. It's passive. It's given. You receive it. You don't apply for it. You don't build it. You can't even build a better version of it. And you can't send your way out of it. That image is still there. Is it marred? Sure. Is it damaged? No doubt. Is it buried? Yes. Is it tarnished? Certainly. But is it revoked? Is it gone? Can it not be redeemed? Never. Absolutely not. In the ancient world, what a king would do is he would set up images of himself throughout his territory. And maybe it would be on a sign or a sculpture or the currency of the land. But wherever the king's image would be, it was announcing this territory belongs to that king. And this image represents who he is and his authority and power to that area. That's what Genesis 1 is talking about. For us to be made in God's image means that we have been placed in our corner of the world to advertise that we belong to the king, that we are his representative, and we carry a resemblance to him that he gave us. And we live our lives in such a way that it points others back to the one whose image we bear, back to our king, back to our creator. Now, if we stay in Genesis and we just look at 2 chapters later, I want you to see how fast the counterfeit shows up to cover the Imago Dei, the image of God. When they sinned, when they disobeyed God, both Adam and Eve, their eyes were opened. They knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together. They hid themselves from each other, and they hid from God. And the fig leaves weren't enough, so they also hid behind some trees. And God came to see them, and they were hiding. And he asked, "Why are you hiding?" And Adam said, "I heard you coming, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." Here's what I want you to see. Our ancestors, the very first human beings, the first thing that they ever created after sin entered the world was a covering so they could hide, a manufactured self. Think about that. Before they invented cities or music or agriculture, humanity's very first invention after sin was image management. Fig leaves were the manufactured presentation of self, and then double hiding behind some trees. And Adam's own words in this narrative tells us what his motive was underneath. I was afraid, so I hid. Most of the men that I work with in coaching fall in the category of what I would call avoiders. They hide. That's what the basement was all about. We're following the footsteps of our original father. He was afraid, so he hid. The thing is, when we hide, when we only present a manufactured version of ourselves, there's no intimacy because we can't be known. There's no intimacy with God. There's no intimacy with our partners. There's no intimacy with self. There's no intimacy with anybody. That's the danger and damage of hiding. The counterfeit self was born the very same moment that shame showed up in our story. None of you men here today built a false image because things were going great in your life. What showed up was what showed up for Adam: fear and shame. So with fear in one hand and shame in the other, you picked up needle and thread and you put fig leaves together. And our fig leaves today may be more sophisticated since Adam's, but your version of image management is simply a modern day version of fig leaves. That's what I love about the Bible. It doesn't just describe what happened back then, it describes what always happens, what continues to happen today. There's nothing new under the sun. We're a lot like Adam. We need to be able to hold two different truths at the same time. Shame explains why a man hides, why he reaches for fig leaves, a counterfeit self. But it does not justify what our covering did. This is where we're different from Adam. Adam's fig leaves fooled no one and really didn't harm anybody. But a manufactured public self like we did that conceals years of deceptive sexuality fooled nearly everybody. And it especially harmed the people closest to us, especially those in the home, our children, but especially our partner. That may explain things, but it does not justify what we did. I want you to see how Jesus handled image management, because he was very direct. And when he did confront image management, it was with some of the strongest language that he ever used in his teaching. You can find this in Matthew 23. He records some very harsh words against a group of people called scribes and Pharisees. They were the most publicly righteous people in the country. Their image was immaculate. And Jesus walks straight past their image and he describes what they're hiding. Jesus can see our basement. We're not fooling him. So the word that Jesus used for these scribes and Pharisees, these men who were so concerned about their image publicly, he used the word Hippocrates in the Greek. It's where we get the word hypocrite. But in Jesus' time and world, That word Hippocrates was not an insult like it is today. It was a job description. A Hippocrates was a stage actor, a performer who would wear a mask, and their profession was to speak lines that belonged to a character, but it didn't represent who they really were. Jesus looked at these image managers and he says, "You are Hippocrates. You are actors. You are hypocrites. Your righteousness is simply a role that you're playing for other people to be impressed. But there is an authentic man behind the mask that you're wearing, and he is not the man that you're performing. There is incongruence." The second word he used was a whitewashed tomb. In his day, the tombs all around Jerusalem were painted white so that travelers who were on a journey to Jerusalem would not accidentally touch one of those tombs. And in their day, they would be considered ceremonially unclean. They wouldn't be able to go to the temple. So the whitewash that people would put on a tomb was this fresh, bright, beautiful paint. And the entire purpose was to mark the location of death, but look very lovely doing so. For us men, I don't know of a more precise picture of the basement in all of Scripture than what Jesus uses right here. Beauty that is engineered on the outside, death that is on the inside. Applying the paint deliberately, consistently, so that people walking past our life would admire the surface and never think about what's underneath. That whitewash on a tomb had to be maintained because it would fade. And so did yours. Every impressive thing that you and I did in public while the basement was still operating was another coat of paint so that people wouldn't see what was really down deep inside. Another angle we can think of image management is in light of the 10 Commandments. Think about the second one, number 2. The second of the 10 Commandments says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image," an idol. Usually when we read that, we think that it's some kind of rule about statues, idols. And it is. But when you look at what an idol actually is underneath the wood or the gold that it's constructed of, what is an idol? An idol is an image that someone made and they polished and they protected and they served and they sacrificed to it as if it was a god. A curated public self is a carved or crafted image. You made it. You polish it all the time. You protected it with lies, especially if it was threatened. You served it. You arranged your whole life around maintaining this image. And just like an idol, you sacrificed to it. Think about everything that got laid at the altar of your image. You sacrificed the truth. You sacrificed your wife's reality, your children's stability, our own integrity. We sacrificed, if you're like me, years of genuine connection and intimacy with people in my life. All of that got sacrificed to the image, to the idol of self, to keep it shiny. Image management is what I would call self-idolatry. It's making your curated, counterfeit image an idol in your life. What does God see? We get a great picture of how God looks at people, and it's different than how people look at people. And the story that we find this is there was a prophet named Samuel who was a spiritually mature man. And God has told him to select the next king for the land. And he stands in front of all of Jesse's sons and he's impressed with the oldest one. He's taller, he's more handsome, he's strong, he looks like a natural leader. And God interrupts Samuel. And God says, man looks on the outward appearance. Even Samuel, a holy man, was being managed and influenced by an external presentation. And God goes on to say, I look at the heart. Your image never worked on God, not once. Every compliment that your image collected, God was watching it happen. And he had full knowledge of the basement and what was going on down there. You have never successfully impressed God, which means you also didn't need to. The exhausting project of trying to be liked and admired by everyone in front of him was always unnecessary, because God has only ever dealt with the authentic, actual you. The actual you is the only version of you that he has ever loved. The actual you is the only version of you that he intends to redeem. God's not interested in restoring your image or your reputation. He restores hearts. For the betrayed partners, for years, the people in your life were looking at the outward appearance. Perhaps your friends looked at the outward appearance of your husband. Maybe his family, maybe your faith community, they all looked at the outward appearance of your husband, and they may have found that it was impressive and convincing and excellent and professionally maintained by him. And for many of you, during that whole time, there was something in you that kept registering something's off. There was static. There was a mismatch between what he was presenting and what you felt in your gut. And maybe you couldn't even put words to it. And when you would raise any concerns, often the community that loved the image that he presented would tell you that you were the problem. Minwalla has a specific clinical description for this. During the covert phase, that's before the basement is exposed, most partners usually subtly detect the presence of the basement, even though they don't have conscious awareness of it yet. What they sense is this incongruence between her gut instincts and his definition of reality, which is called gaslighting. When we gaslight our wives, we train them to distrust their own survival instincts that God gave them. So when you put the clinical picture from Minwalla side by side with scripture, this is what you get. The betrayed partner's gut and instincts kept reading our heart, while everyone else in our life was probably reading our appearance. Her instincts were functioning exactly as God designed them to function. The deception was engineered deliberately to defeat and overcome her instincts. So even though the whole community in our life may be buying our image, God was reading our heart, and so was our partner. And God was agreeing with her gut the entire time. Now, some partners can feel a level of shame and blame. Sadly, they may be asking themselves, why didn't I see this sooner? And I want you to apply some grace to yourself, because you not seeing it is not evidence that something's wrong with you or there's something deficient with your instincts. It simply is an illustration of the level and the quality of the deception. The whitewash was very convincing. The mask was very convincing. Sometimes we men, we get defensive around this concept of image management. And some of us may be saying, now, wait a minute. I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. I don't go down to the basement. I don't act out anymore. In fact, I did a full disclosure. So that means I'm not managing an image anymore. I want you to look at the progression on this slide. And how do we measure transparency? What we usually went from on the left was this engineered deception, what Jesus calls the hypocrites, the mask, the whitewash. We are presenting to others, especially our partner, an engineered self that's not congruent with who we really are and what we're really doing in the basement. Then exposure comes, D-Day. And perhaps many of us, you went through an event, a process called a therapeutic disclosure. And I hope and pray that it was full, that you told the whole truth and you didn't leave anything out, that you illuminated every centimeter of the basement and you told your partner everything. And that's great. That's necessary. That's foundational. That's the floor. That's the starting point of transparency. It's not the end point. The therapeutic disclosure, or what Scripture would call confession, is how we establish shared reality with our partner. But what needs to happen every day after that is maintaining that shared reality and not allowing a parallel reality to be created again. What that means is radical transparency that is not prompted by our partner. We volunteer real-time shared reality with our partner. The mechanism that many of us use to do this is a daily check-in. The daily check-in that I do every morning is my way of ensuring that I maintain shared reality with my partner. And I share with her anything that came up that day so that she and I are operating from the same truth. And I don't allow myself to craft a new image or a parallel reality. Men, one way you know that you're growing in this practice is that she doesn't have to dig for things, but you volunteer them. You beat her to the questions, and you especially share with her things that are not flattering. They don't make you look good. And you know that if you were silent about it, she never would have known. That's an indication that you're no longer protecting the image anymore. I do want to give one caution. I saw this in my own early recovery. I see it in a lot of brothers. Recovery itself becomes the new image. You could call it recovery guy. It's a new role. It's a new mask we wear. A skilled image manager who can play beautifully. It's the version of self that we present in our meetings. And this version has the right vocabulary and appears to be very humble. But if we're honest, only when there's an audience watching, the tomb just got a new coat of paint. The test of our transparency is what we volunteer when no one would find out about it. Partners, I have a caution for you as well. That's for your protection. If he starts being transparent with you, which you are owed that does not now put you under obligation to him. Transparency is his obligation, and it's what God requires of him. But your trust is a separate thing entirely. And just because he's being transparent now doesn't mean you owe him trust. Your trust, if it ever comes back, rebuilds on your timeline. A timeline that's built on a track record of demonstrated shared reality that he provides to you. So nothing I'm saying today is asking you to bless him, to believe him, to draw near to him, to trust him before what's real has proven itself to you over time.